when you think about where privacy and security intersect, right? Think of it like this. Security is about data protection, right? We're protecting against the unauthorized access of important private data. But privacy is how that data that's collected gets collected and how it's used. Think of all of the issues we've talked about concerning data brokers and mismanagement of data. And none of this involves a data breach, but it causes massive problems and is used in cybercrime to launch and result in cyber attacks and data breaches. These two kind of distinct fields overlap, especially when it comes to your personal information. This is the story of Mary Marwig and how to reduce risk when managing data privacy. Come join us as we dive deeper behind the scenes of security and cybercrime today, interviewing top technology leaders from around the world and sharing true cybercrime stories to raise awareness. From the creators of Vigilance, the newest global technology newsletter, translating cyber news into business language we all understand. So please help us keep this going by subscribing for free to our YouTube channel and downloading our podcast episodes on Apple and Spotify so we can continue to bring you more of what matters. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and now the show. All right, well, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies. I'm your host, David Morrow. Very excited about today's episode. We've got Mary Marwig with us, and she's a privacy advocate and a privacy consultant with Data Grail. We're going to hear all about her background, her expertise, and Data Grail and some of the things that they do while we discuss and explore privacy and its intersection with cybersecurity. She works with top brands there at Data Grail, places like Salesforce, Amazon, Instacart, and more, focusing on kind of building customer trust and reducing risk. And you've been in the privacy industry and the data security industry for many years. You hold a CIPP, and we're going to find out what these acronyms mean in just a minute, Mary. It's a CIPP/US, a CIPM, and an FIP certification from the International Association of Privacy Professionals, and earned a master's in poli-sci from U of I. So welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
No, we're very excited. So let's get the acronyms out of the way first. So CIPP, what does that mean?
Certified Information Privacy Professional for the United States. So the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, is one of the top professional organizations that we have for privacy. They have great content. They do certifications. I've earned the US one, and privacy in the United States is very fractured compared to other jurisdictions like in the EU. So
right, it's very different, right?
Oh,
I mean, especially when, in the areas where they have GDPR and all of those, where they hold privacy as a fundamental human right, unlike we do here.
Right. Over there in the EU, which they do have a certification for that. That's more of a comprehensive privacy law that covers everyone. In the United States, we have sectoral, so privacy for healthcare, privacy for education, privacy for finance stuff. We have privacy
all the different verticals, right?
Absolutely. And now we're starting to get state-based consumer privacy laws. And so that's where we specialize. I also have a certified information privacy manager. That's what the other acronym stands for.
Yep.
And the
CIPM.
That stands for Fellow of Information and Privacy. So I've been around long enough to earn a fellow distinction.
Wow, very cool. And what's a FIP? What's a FIP?
Fellow of Information Privacy.
Very cool. So I'm very familiar with all the cybersecurity certs. So as I'm learning more about privacy, this is really good. So let's back up just generally, kind of what inspired you to get into privacy as a career? I mean, you were coming from political science, so that was my background too. So I stemmed into cybersecurity. How did you segue into privacy?
Privacy found me, and the interesting thing about our profession is there's no one natural path, really.
No,
Uh,
right. In
we
either profession, in either
right,
cybersecurity or privacy, right?
absolutely.
It's a mix of marketing, politics, technology, like desire to pass laws, all of this combined, right?
It's very multidisciplinary.
Mm-hmm.
So there are now starting to be higher educational programs geared for
Right.
privacy, but really at this stage, I'd say it just kind of has to find you, or you have to have a passion for it. And so that's how I got involved. I became very aware of my lacking privacy rights because I'm a victim of a few privacy harms that
Oh,
fundamentally
yeah.
shaped my life. So I had my identity stolen. That's kind of a natural way for a lot of people to get involved and immersed in this topic. Um, and then later,
And for those listeners that have undergone that, because we get a lot of comments and a lot of emails from listeners. So if anybody has had uh, identity stolen, issues like that, please feel free to reach out right on our site, cybercrimejunkies.com. There's a link right there. You can get in touch with us. We can direct you into various aspects of places where you can get some help. But it is brutal when that happens. It's a long journey, isn't it?
absolutely. And I solved my identity problem back then by just paying my way out of it because I didn't know there were resources like what
Right.
you just offered, David. And that was a huge lift for me. When I was a young person starting out in life, I didn't have extra money to spend
Right.
on that. So it really cut into my well being.
Yep.
So, we have to think about it that way. It's emotional cost,
Well, I was
financial
going to say
cost.
even far beyond just the financial impact, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it really affects the emotions and your sense of belonging, your sense of safety, your own psychological well-being.
Absolutely. And that was the second privacy harm that you're touching on that really got me interested in privacy. I was heavily stalked by someone with a lot of
Oh,
access to commercial data. We'll get into this a little bit today about the vast amount of personal data floating out there that we may not even be aware of. Just the problem is at a scale that is just so large.
yeah, I really think listeners are going to be shocked by some of the information that you've shared with me so far because it has blown us away when we were reviewing it.
Absolutely. There's Oh my gosh, how do we even start? But like data brokers, there's thousands of them that literally broker in personal data. You may not have a business relationship with these companies, so why would they have information about you? But it's legal, or it's slowly becoming less legal.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, well, in here, let's jump into that in just a second because there's a couple segues that we can go to get there. And that is, we always encourage our listeners to check out like haveibeenpwned.com, right?
Yeah,
You can see whether you've been breached, and I guarantee you have. And then what'll be shocking is you won't recognize some of the places that have leaked your data, right?
right.
And you'll be like, who are they? And you'll look and you'll find they're a data broker, right? So and a lot of it has to do with clicking on cookies, accepting cookies. Like a lot of it has to do with giving out information to download papers or to get information from websites. There's a whole way, and the ads that we track, our social media use. There's a whole bunch of ways that they track our data. It's shockingly scary. But
It's
getting back
horrifying.
into what we were talking about, your initiation into privacy. It kind of stemmed right after they formed GDPR. That was really kind of the beginning of privacy for most of us, right?
It was actually right before that. So
Mm,
I used to randomly work in the hospitality technology industry, and I got invited to a conference in 2017, and almost the entire conference was about how hoteliers were going to operationalize for this thing called GDPR. And I was like,
hmm.
"What's GDPR? What is this?" And
Well,
people there
yeah, I
were like,
imagine that industry got hit right off the bat, right?
"Right. Well,
Travel,
hospitality has a lot
yeah,
of personal information. And there are some major cases of issues with privacy harms, like when Marriott bought Starwood. I think it was like
Yeah, we have several episodes on that. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
It's a part of the trifecta of like the largest data breach in history,
Right.
right? The OPM breach, the Office of Personal Management, the
I'm part of that.
yeah, the Marriott Starwood breach, which happened, and then the Anthem breach, which happened right here in Indianapolis,
Yeah.
all around the same time. And on the dark web, that data, they were massive breaches, right? And on the dark web, they would have been worth billions. And
Yeah.
in our security awareness trainings, when we train people, we always say, how much do you think it was sold for on the dark web? And people are like 10 billion, 5 billion. However, like zero, because it wasn't about a cyber crime for financial gain. It was about data collection, right? It was about privacy, right? At the end of the day, it was about, they just, the four people from the Chinese government that the DOJ indicted, because it's about espionage.
Absolutely. Information is power. And that's why when I found out about the GDPR back in 2017, so it went into effect in 2018. So everyone was freaking out. We have a year to figure out how to operationalize this, and I'll say we are still trying to figure that out. Not very many companies have everything worked out yet. And on top of that, we're getting more and more laws. But so I decided at that time, just given my hope, as a person who suffered some of those harms, like just psychological harm, financial harm, that I should move into this direction with my career. So I did. So I first started at a company called G2.com. They do software reviews. And they didn't have a data privacy technology taxonomy yet because the technology was so new. So, how do you, as a company, operationalize any of this? That's a tough question.
Right.
And so through that, I researched this area. I also did data security research. And through that process, I got to know a lot of founders at privacy technology companies. And
that's
through
where
that,
you met Daniel, the founder of DataGrail.
That's how I met Daniel. So Daniel's the CEO of DataGrail. It's one of the leading providers of data privacy technology services for companies. So we work with like big brands, like you mentioned, Instacart, Amazon, Salesforce as a customer. If you want to see a really great example of what a public-facing privacy program looks like, I highly encourage you to check out Salesforce's privacy operations center, where you can do a number of actions, which we'll get through what your rights are as a person. So yeah, I've been working there.
They even have that. Is that why they have that ad with Matthew McConaughey on it, where he's talking about if AI is the Wild West and data is our new gold, and how Salesforce keeps things private? Is that
I actually
part
haven't
of it,
seen
right?
That, but I've heard about it.
You should not have a life and watch TV at night. It's on. So anyway,
I've heard it's really good, but you know what? I'm going to push back on that, though. I don't think data is the new gold. I think it's the new plutonium.
Oh, wow. Interesting little word ninja move,
right?
There.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful in the right hands, and it's very, very dangerous in the wrong hands. Correct. So that's how I'd like folks to start thinking about this, because the data is about you. It's about individual people. That's what's at stake here. We're not worried about companies losing information about like their go-to-market strategy for next month. Like no customer really cares about that, but like they do care if you lose information about,
your own health, your own psychological treatment, your own, like all of the things that that an individual may deem sacred. Right?
Absolutely. Where do you go to church? Who do you love? What do you like to watch? Where do you go? Like location data, I think, is not well understood of how powerful that can be. Like even if you take away identifiers, you can figure out very fast who someone is just based on their movements. There are locations. Yeah.
Well, and what's scary, you just brought up something that's really scary. So a lot of doing this podcast and being in the field that I'm in, I know a lot of hackers, and I know a lot of good hackers, white hat hackers and black hat hackers. And I'll tell you, it's scary when they challenge each other. Like somebody takes a picture and then they'll put it up and they'll be like, okay, where am I?
Yeah.
And man, it takes like less than 10 minutes. And someone's like, you are at this intersection in the middle of Scotland. And they're able to identify it just from all of those markers, the angle. They're able to look at the sun angle to figure out what time of day it was taken. Oh my gosh, it's scary. So sorry, I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but it really shakes me up whenever I see that.
Imagine you don't even need a picture. Imagine you just need someone's last 5 credit card swipes.
Right.
How many Dunkin' Donuts has Mary Marwig been at in the last 2 hours?
Right, exactly.
You know, oh, she's probably within this area. Or we know she goes here every single day. She's probably there at this time.
Well, and the data tracking, though, in the beginning, I believe, is there for a good reason, isn't it? Because, for example, we use this example when we do our trainings, and that is, let's say we're taking a road trip and we're in Dubuque, Iowa, and we swipe our credit card in a gas pump, right? Our bank will text us and say, is that you? Like, how do they know? Like, we could be at home or at the office and buy things on Amazon from China all day long and no one's going to text us. But why, when we do that, will they immediately know? Because they know what our behavior is and they know that that's an anomaly, right?
Yes.
And we want them to do that because if that wasn't us, right, we want to be alerted so we could tell them that would be fraud. So, right. I mean, in the beginning, or at least a part of this, there's a benevolent purpose to it, isn't there?
Yeah. I think about things just like the plutonium example. There's use cases and abuse cases.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So what is happening? But I think the problem that's not well understood right now is that there are use cases that we're not aware of. So what sort of tracking is happening on you that you just don't know? Maybe you just, agreed to some terms of service or some privacy policy thing because you were trying to get through your day and just get a service. But part of that may have included, oh, well, we retained the rights to sell and share the fact that you went to that gas station and that you bought a thing of beef jerky. And so now we're going to target you with lots of natural beef jerky products or whatever. Did you agree to that? And that's part of the privacy problem right now is, at least especially in the American context, we lack consent. We lack transparency that any of these data practices are happening. And so that's where we're starting to see a lot of these state-based privacy laws, which we have, I think it's like 13, 15 now. We just passed 2 more this year. So within the last 3 weeks, New Jersey and New Hampshire passed state-based privacy.
Now, what's the aim of those? Is the aim of those to provide like informed consent? Is that really the aim of them? Because I know that Congress was addressing, for example, TikTok, right? And part of the issue there is, hey, we just want to curate our lives, our dance videos online. We don't necessarily even realize that you're recording all of our keystrokes throughout, like everything we type in. Every time we type in a password, you have a recording of that. We didn't know that. We just want to record our dance strokes, like our dance moves, right? Like I think because people weren't informed of what they were giving consent for.
100%. And so one of the things the questions I ask myself is, how do these companies make money?
Right.
Because what the service that they're offering us might be free. We don't pay to be on some of these platforms. How do they monetize this data, or who's ultimately getting that? Something you mentioned about the keystrokes is the dynamics of them. So it's the dynamics of how you type can identify you as an individual. It's like the same as your signature. Like only you can sign this biometric.
Right.
How hard
well, they can
type.
tell if you're right-handed, left-handed, what words you misspell often, all of it.
Yes, it's like your gait on your fingertips. So it's itself an identifier, a biometric. But that's something I really challenge people to peel back. How does this company make money before you sign up for any kind of service or just agree to the terms and services of this? And it's really a issue of lacking transparency. I think a lot of people have expectations of their privacy, and then when they find out there's a company selling their data, sharing their data, or using it for another purpose that they didn't expect, that's where this conflict is coming in, where the companies are saying, well, you agreed to this, 100-page document that you should have read, whereas it's being marketed as something completely different. So there's a clash in expectations. The consumer privacy laws are really there to give consumers rights, to understand what is going on, so to make better informed choices. Like, to your point, informed consent. Yes, I allow you to sell my data to third parties in exchange for this free service. There's what's a phrase? There's a phrase called like, it's like pay or data, something like that. Pay or okay. That's what it is. It's you either pay up for like a subscription or you okay for the data sharing, right? But that's just not really been very clear until now. So that's a step. But then you also have other rights, like you have the right to access the data that a company has on you. What kind of categories of data are they collecting? Like, for example, if you are a car owner of a smart car, you could say, hey, what types of data do you have on me? And you might be shocked to learn that there's a car company brand that collects sexual orientation data. Why? What does that?
It's very relevant to the cars that you buy.
But I don't.
No, I'm like, what? Like, how is that even relevant?
That's my exact question. But
right.
For them, it's like covering your bases on the types of data. If you have access to or collect, then you can sell it.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think that they want that data? Is it about how they sell ads, right? And the targeting of ads? Because if you've ever been on the I want to buy ad side of the table, right? You want to know, I want to buy ads, and the information that they offer you is shocking. They're like, well, you can run an ad for this type of person and find exactly what the type of person that's shopping for this thing. And Absolutely. You're like, how can you run my ad? Like I'm older, so I remember like just television and just regular television. Yes. Every ad would come on. Like they weren't able to target that ad for the exact demographic, right? They would kind of do it generally based on the television show that was on, but it wasn't very targeted. Now they're able to pinpoint exactly who sees what ad.
Absolutely. It's like divorced moms of young children making $150,000 a year who work in, XYZ industry and are up at 2 a.m.
Exactly.
Doom scrolling. Yes. Like that's like a list you can buy.
Yeah.
I mean, data has value. Like you wouldn't collect it if you can't sell it,
Right.
That's
so let's talk about that bridge, that overlap, that kind of Venn diagram between data and data privacy and data security, because it's really interesting, because all of this, I mean, those that are charged with defending an organization's brand, right? It's all about, what type of data. First of all, most organizations have no idea the vast amounts of data or even where it's located, right? And we learned that after a data breach, because after a data breach, we're like, so where is, like, what was like what happened, and then where's your data? And then that's where you're always like, oh, then there's another copy over there, and then there's another copy over there, and you're like, oh my, you guys don't even know where your data is, right? And that's very common, unfortunately.
This is so common. And how privacy and security relate, they're like cousins. Sometimes people conflate the two, and they're like, oh, security or privacy is just a subsect of security. No, not at all. They're two separate issues. So I consider security to be data protection of all sorts. So company data, and then including personal data, customer data.
Right. The employees as well as the customers.
Yeah, because employees are considered by law data subjects in certain jurisdictions. So California, EU, some of the new US ones don't. They're just consumers. But data privacy, on the other hand, is about data collection and data use. What are you doing with this data? Where does it go? What systems process it? Who do we share it with? How long do we keep it? What legal basis do we have to hold this data? if you're in an EU context, there's only 6 legal ways you can process a person's data. What's happening? What business processes do we use this for? Do you, like, a good example? Something that drove me crazy was when I think it was a social media platform that was collecting phone numbers for the purposes of second factor authentication, where they're like, oh, give us your cell phone. We're going to send you SMS codes for this. And then their marketing team got a hold of the same data and started using it for a marketing purpose. And that was not what the people who signed up for the authentication
that gets back to that informed consent thing again, right? Like, that's not what we said you can use my cell phone for.
Correct. Like, imagine if you were like printing pictures. This was one that I came across recently. I uploaded my pictures to a photo printing place, and they were like, you agree to allow us to utilize the location data of your photos.
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, where is this going to end up? And like, what sort of,
you're like, I just want my picture of my dog on a pillow. Like, that's all I'm trying to do. Like, I don't want you to know that I was in Georgia in August. Like, right. And you're giving them all that in order to process and most people never read the T's and C's. They just don't. They just don't. They just click and they go, yeah, of course I agree. I want to get this pillow. And that's it.
That's one of the greatest lies of the internet, that I agree. People don't. You're starting to see that now with the cookie pop-ups where they're like, click here, agree to being tracked. Most people just either dismiss it or click away. But no, we don't agree. It's just how the surveillance capitalism world has evolved. But, getting back to that, we are starting to see companies take the right steps forward here. So GDPR was a regulatory issue that we're still operationalizing. How do you service people's data rights? So you need, what you said before was like, you need to know what data you're processing. You have to be able to understand the risks of processing that data and either do something about it. So like, that might include securing it properly or having the data retention schedules very clearly outlined and then actually destroying it after that. Or making sure that only certain parts of the business, like the security team, has access to those phone numbers for two-factor authentication purposes and not the marketing team for, ads.
And we're seeing that. We're seeing that in some of the large data breaches. So on the other side, what's happening is certain organizations, their networks aren't configured. This is why there's such a big push for zero trust, because there's social engineering occurs. Somebody's two-factor authentication. They get them on a WhatsApp and they get them to approve the multi-factor authentication, and then they get in. But that person's over in this department, but they wind up getting access to the data, like in the financial end or the code, the source code of the organization. Like, that person didn't even know that they could access it, but the threat actors figured that out.
Right.
So like, how is, like, some of that is the technical configurations that were set up, or the fact that they don't have zero trust. They don't have to re-authenticate at each level as they escalate privileges. But some of it is also the organizations willingly share data, and part of it is they want the data. The marketing department wants that data, right? And so they're going back and forth.
You've just touched on a very good point, where I feel like in security, we're dealing with usually external threat actors or like malicious insiders, like data, misuse. But the problem with privacy is actually like the agreed upon uses of this data. The business is like, oh, we thought this was all copacetic. Like, that's not. So it's a threat. Just lack of awareness of what processing is happening, what is happening over here in the company versus somewhere over here, or like a product.
So it winds up being a threat to a consumer by agreement, right? It's like internal agreement at an organization to share data winds up harming a consumer.
Exactly. And so that's why there's this concept of privacy by design. I actually was kind of horrified to learn of this term because I thought this was already happening, where like when you build a product, you have someone on the team being like, hey, this is how there could be a privacy harm. Someone could do something wrong with this, or like not aligned with our values. That's
Yeah,
actually a
what
thing.
are the different types of privacy harms? You talked about, you had an image. We can put it up on the screen. It was like the typology of privacy harms by Citron and Soloff.
Yeah, so those two are fantastic privacy researchers. They've done foundational work in our area. And so they've really listed out various experiences an end person, so in a consumer context or an employee context, could feel from a privacy harm. So that would be physical harm. So, like if your location data gets out there and someone's using it to literally figure out where you are, like that's part of my concern as a person who's been stalked. My physical location is very important to me, and that the privacy of that information. Then there's reputational harm. Say you did something that you're not proud of, like, I don't know, there was a really interesting case many years ago. There was a breach at a dating site called Ashley Madison.
Yeah, we talk about it often in
you
our security awareness,
know,
because that's a site that was based on privacy, right? It was
mm,
for married couples that wanted to have affairs, and the whole point is that got breached, and the attackers then extorted them to get payment they didn't pay, and so they released the names of all these people.
right,
So
right.
lots of harm came from that.
Oh my gosh. And if you read some of the user stories there, like just like heartbreaking situations. So it's not as black and white as, anyone on their moral high horse would expect. It's like tragic
Oh
stories. So
yeah.
yes, reputational harms, emotional harms, just like having to deal with this, thwarted expectations, economic harms, relationship harms,
Well,
chilling
there
effect.
was a breach. There was a breach of. I mean, there's so many, especially in the healthcare space. When there's breaches, there was a breach of an online therapy app, and it has caused a lot of damage to people
Mhm.
because they have their innermost sacred thoughts and fears and anxieties expressed, and now they're literally for sale online,
Absolutely.
right? I mean,
So we've
that's a
seen that where, and this is what gets very interesting. So a lot of the times the trackers that we are being tracked by online will figure out information about us, like whether we're depressed or we may have a medical condition, or um, maybe you're pregnant. That's for an advertiser, that's very valuable information, because people who, for example, may be depressed may be more willing to buy something. People who are pregnant are shown to have a propensity to switch brands, so it's like a very critical time to possibly capture a new customer. That was the issue with the Sephora case that you might have heard of a few years ago. The California attorney general, who at the time was in,
right, the CCP. Yeah.
basically, there was this case with Sephora where Sephora was selling the shopping cart contents of someone to a third party. And that third party would say, oh, look, they're buying prenatal vitamins. Maybe we should put them in the possibly pregnant group, and then sell that information.
Really? So Sephora is the makeup
It
company,
is,
right?
but they also sell vitamins, and they also
Okay,
sell other stuff. Like,
got it.
and it's
Got it.
usually, their target audience is
So
women.
they were selling the like discarded or just the shopping cart items that somebody might have in and then remove for whatever reason, right?
Yes. Well, no,
Whether
what
they
they're
buy it or
not.
not.
Yeah. And so that was
Wow.
the issue, because especially in this era now where in some states, you have fewer and fewer bodily autonomy rights, that could be very dangerous data to people in states like Texas or whatever, you
Right.
know. So
Yeah.
there's harm in that case. So that would be a chilling effect harm, right? Where you might
Yep.
not want to buy stuff online anymore. That
Right.
the vitamins issue was an example from many years ago that Target was also caught up in. Target, um, there was a woman who was pregnant and didn't tell her family members yet. And then all of a sudden, she lived with her folks. And then all of a sudden, their household started getting coupons in the mail for baby stuff.
Oh.
And the
Because
person,
Target had captured some of the data that she had been looking at.
she had bought the prenatal vitamins, and then they put her in a marketing data set. And so the household was getting a bunch of coupons for baby stuff. And one of the parents of this person was like, why are we getting all these baby stuff coupons?
Wow.
Right? And so just a simple act of you thinking you're just going to the store, you're going to buy yourself some vitamins, you haven't told anyone, that's your personal business.
Right.
You show up in these data sets, right? And that can be very harmful. Imagine, I don't know what this person's story was, but maybe she didn't feel safe telling her family that
Right.
she was pregnant,
Well,
right?
maybe they were going to kick her out or something, right? Like, I
This is a
mean, you
real
don't know.
thing,
Like, every family's different.
right?
Yeah.
How do
Holy cow.
customers, make sure that they don't do that? So that's
Right.
kind of what we're in with these consumer privacy laws that we're starting to see. It's like giving people back some rights. I can tell a company, don't sell or share my data. I've told companies, delete everything you have on me.
Right.
You can access it. What do you have on me?
Right.
Things like that. I actually do employ a service, so you'll start to see this more. They're called authorized agents, which are allowed by California law. Basically, you can give permission to a company or another person to go and do data deletion or data access requests on your behalf, or do not
Oh,
sell and
yeah.
share.
Almost like your advocate, like your privacy advocate,
Yes,
right?
yes. So there's a few out there. One, Consumer Reports recently came out with a free app. It's not comprehensive, but it's a start. I personally pay for a service that does this. It's not cheap, but it's comprehensive. Just to
Yeah.
get my data out there, especially my location data from my mobile identifying numbers, the
Oh, yeah.
advertising numbers. So if you don't turn that off, do. But yeah, I mean, it's really about retaining control, making
So
sure that,
hang on, back up just a second.
oh,
So what's that tip that you just gave to our listeners? Like remove the
the MAID number, mobile advertising identifier. So
right.
basically, the apps that are on your phone usually have access to that, and you can turn that off.
Okay. Good
The other
advice.
tip would be is if you want to reduce your digital footprint, you can employ, you can either go company by company, which is very laborious, and that only covers the companies you know about, to delete your data or to restrict the selling or sharing of your data.
Right.
Or you can employ an authorized agent service that will do that for you. Not all of them are very comprehensive. There are gaps right now, but there is a new law in California that's trying to resolve that. It just got passed last year called the California Delete Act.
Mhm.
Basically, data brokers, so any company that sells or shares information about a consumer with whom they don't have a direct relationship, has to register with the state, and then in the next couple years they have to figure out a way to do deletion requests. If the person goes to the state and says, hey, I want all the data brokers in this state of California to delete all of the information they have on me, the data
That's a big
broker,
ask on
it's
companies,
a
isn't it?
huge ask.
That's a
It's a
huge ask
lot.
because it's a really big manual task to go and find that user, find their data, and then delete it.
Well, and that's what we do at DataGrail. So we help companies do that. What data are you processing first and
Mm-hmm.
foremost? Because, like as you said, it's a mess. There's a lot of applications out there that process this. So we typically find that in an organization with like a 500 to 1,000 employees, they'll have 1,500 different applications, but IT
Right.
may only be aware of like 200.
Right. Because of
There's a lot
shadow
of
IT, right? Because of
shadow.
all these, there's Internet of Things devices, people get grants or money, or they invest themselves and they tie in different apps, and everybody's got an AI app that they want to try out, and all these things get tied into the network.
Download an extension that nobody
Mm-hmm.
realized was sucking up data. It's a
Yep.
lot. So that's why it cracks me up when I hear about companies trying to do this manually. I'm like, how? How are
Right.
you doing this manually? The
Right.
scale is just too big. So we help companies understand what they're processing first and foremost. We also help them understand the risk of specific data holding, like the risks themselves as a company and the risks to their consumers. And then we also do things like processing these consumer requests. So, if I'm a customer of a makeup company and I want to know what data they collect on me, I have I don't have a right in Illinois, but if I was from California or the other states that have these laws, I would have a right to that. And so what do you give them? You know, you have to find that data in the systems, pull it back, put it together, send it out, and it all has to be accounted for and tracked because this is regulated. It's not just a nice to have. You're just like, well, we're doing the right thing. Sure.
Well, it can't just be emailed as an attachment because that could be compromised too, right? You would have to have like a secure encrypted, encrypted on one end, encrypted on the other, and then sent. Like there's a whole mess of things you have to think about.
Well, so you just actually touched on something that I've talked about. This doesn't really get talked a lot about, but like weaponizing access requests. So pretending to be someone else in order to get commercial data about someone. So
absolutely.
The FTC,
absolutely. I mean, especially we just saw that large, massive, the mother of all data leaks with 26 billion credentials. So it's just becoming easier and easier to impersonate somebody or to be impersonated online. And so from that point, then they could make data requests and get more of your data.
Absolutely. So that is a threat vector as well, especially if you're doing like social engineering, right?
Right.
So you find you're doing like a whaling attack. You find someone you want to like try to get into their system, then you go impersonate them. You get a bunch of commercial data about them. You pretend to be the company they do the most business with, send a few crappy phishing links because it's contextual and appropriate and like they would recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
What have you given up? So that's why you need to verify these requests as well. So you need to we have a product called Smart Verification at DataGrill, which basically provides contextual information. So it's not something you can just easily Google or find out about someone, but something they would only know. It's kind of like something you know, something you are, the types of authentication methods. But it's something to keep in mind when you're operationalizing this, because it's a hard problem. So there's really no way to do it manually. I just laugh when people tell me that. I'm like, oh, how? That's privacy theater.
Well, that wraps this up. Thanks for joining, everybody. Hope you got value out of digging deeper behind the scenes of security and cybercrime today. Please don't forget to help keep this going by subscribing free to our YouTube channel at Cybercrime Junkies Podcast, and download and enjoy all of our past episodes on Apple and Spotify podcasts so we can continue to bring you more of what matters. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for joining us.